Hey everybody, Craig Sawyer. I want to share with you some things I'm blessed to know from a scientist friend of mine. His name is Jack Sacco. Quantum physics are his area of expertise, and he was able to figure out some of the science of the resurrection through studying the Shroud of Turin personally. And fantastic body of study. I think it's going to bless you. We've done a couple of interviews with Jack. One of them is still in editing, but in time for Easter, I wanted to cover this for everybody for consideration, along with some of the misnomers that I see posted about the shroud. I posted a picture of it, and there's all kinds of drama and people, a lot of emotion surrounding the topic. And I want to cover some things that I do know and share it out there, encourage people to study and see some of the newer investigations on it and what's actually known about it and what's not. So one of the objectives, before I get to Jack Sacco's science of the shroud, the quantum physics of what really took place at that moment of resurrection, beautiful, it's glorious. It's just as the Bible describes, only the shroud gives a more detailed witness to what took place. And there's just a wealth of scientific knowledge and data in that witness of that shroud, of that linen. So one of the things I see people say is, well, the shrouds, it's medieval, it's not dated back to the time of Christ. That's actually not true. The reason people believe that, and that's been said, is because there was a sample of the shroud that was taken from an area toward the outside, toward a corner, and that area had been repaired in the 1500s, I think it was, after a church fire. So the shroud was folded in a box, and there was a church fire, and there was a little fire damage and some water damage in fighting the fire, and that shroud was damaged and then somewhat repaired. And that scientific team, when they took the sample of the shroud to run the carbon dating on, I think it was in the 80s when they ran that carbon dating, they botched it. They took from a sample that had been partially repaired. So they got a whole range of times from the time of Christ all the way to the time of those newest fibers that they had sampled. So they botched it, and there's why they botched it. I don't think they did it intentionally. Some people say there were some religious motives to disprove the evidence of Christ's resurrection. I don't know the scientists. I know there were all types there. There were Jews, there were atheists, there were Christians, all different types. And, science, when it's done right, it's supposed to be done in good faith. So anyway, that's what we know about it. It's not medieval. It is the time of the original fibers do date back to exactly the time of Christ, as does the pollen within those original fibers and all the rest of it. So the more you research it, the more you realize it's absolutely genuine and authentic, and it's mind-blowing and beautiful and glorious, and what it really demonstrates. Number two, I want to say, a lot of people say, well, I don't need that for my faith. Guess what? Me too. I don't need it. But since Jesus energized that cloth and irradiated it with his glory at the moment of his resurrection and left it for us, obviously, as an artifact that he knew when our technology was going to increase and we could begin to unpack and discover what he left us. It's just a glorious blessing. You're not supposed to hand your faith on it. I don't think that was ever the intent. And to fall down over it and say it's a graven image. Well, nobody engraved it. Jesus Christ glorified that himself. So if you want to take it up with him for engraving, for carving a false god statue that people would worship instead of Jesus, when it's really just an image on a cloth from his glory, from his energy, then I know that's something you'll have to take up with the Father yourself. I'm not going to have that argument with him. I'm just going to continue worshiping and loving him and say thanks for the glorious blessing that he shared with those of us that believe, to research and go, wow, that's what an intensely beautiful thing. So several people have said, well, it looks like a night. It looks like so-and-so of a night. I'm like, you know what? Try to imagine how little that matters. A night from the medieval times? Well, I think it looks like the lead singer from Three Dog Night. Who cares? Who cares what somebody thinks, who it thinks it looks? I think it looks like. I see people that look like my friends all over the planet online all the time. I'll walk to the airport and go, that dude looks like a guy I went to high school with. Why is that an argument about anything? It's just, some of it's silly, folks. I'm trying to get to the parts that are not. The Sidarian, so they're like, no, there's two cloths and they're at conflict. No, I don't believe they're in conflict at all. There's the Sudarium and there's the Shroud. So my understanding of it is the Sudarium is the smaller cloth that was used to wrap Jesus' face with when they pulled him down off the cross out of respect after he was dead and transport him to the tomb. And the Shroud of Turin is the longer, like 17 meters long, burial cloth that was used to cover his entire body for burial. So I'm not clear on whether the Sudarium was left on his face after the Shroud of Turin was put on, or if it was taken off and folded, or if someone took possession of it at that time. I'm not clear on that history. A lot of you know more about that. Whatever happened, that I think that's public knowledge. It's documented. But they're not in conflict. They were both, according to the forensic evidence and scientific studies, they seem to both, in my observation, be authentic garments that were used. So interesting. And some people say, well, no, he was beaten beyond recognition. He was not recognizable, so therefore the shroud can't be authentic. Well, if you look at it this way, when he was beaten and bloodied, just covered in blood, you can't hardly recognize somebody. So yeah, he's beaten severely. His body was shredded, horrible. How long can you survive and how badly disfigured can you be before you're not alive anymore? So I believe the description was authentic, that he was unrecognizable, but I think it's because he was beaten and shredded and bloody. But once cleaned up, once washed and patted dry and treated with the herbs that they did before burial, and then once he resurrected, what energy, what force was radiating through that physical body, that glorified light body when he resurrected? How much different might he have looked than he did a couple days prior when they put his dead body there, before it was re-energized, glorified, and come back to life? So I think there's plenty of room there for the shroud to be absolutely authentic and the gospel to be absolutely authentic. It's just understanding what took place and how they fit together. So, yeah, that's my thing on that. Now to the science. So Matt Marsden, actor and producer Matthew Marsden, and Jack Sacco were able to go and have unique special access to the Shroud of Turin. They spent quite a bit of time with it, examining the shroud in private. It's guarded by the Carabinieri there in Italy. And Jack went around interviewing all of the different scientists that were part of the bigger previous study I think it was in the 80s. And he learned a lot from them. And, I don't need to go through all the different chemistry, the biochemistry and all that's in the shroud that's a witness to what took place. Fantastic. All the pollens and the dust and everything that testify to the exact time, exact place of the resurrection. Fantastic. There's plenty of documentary interviews on that. Please go consume those until you're happy and satisfied. I've watched quite a few. What Jack was focusing on was the image, how the image came to be on the linen. So Joseph of Arimathea, a wealthy man, had bought this heavy quality linen burial cloth to cover Jesus with in the tomb. And they did that. So they know that it's a left-hand herringbone, Jewish Hebrew weave, and high quality. And so Jack's studying, okay, there's no pigments that's transferred onto that shroud. There's no dyes, there's no paints, there's no burns that caused Jesus' image, his body image, to be on it. So how does the image on there? Why is it on there? What took place? And he was studying it from all the different angles of chemistry and the different scientific methodologies to ascertain how this image came to be on that linen. And what's important to know is in the linen, in the innermost fibers, there is no image. There's no information of that image. It's only on the outermost, like if this was that fiber, or if this was that linen, not in the middle of the material of the fabric was any information. It's only on the outermost fuzz, the very outermost fibrils, they refer to it. The edge of the fibers, that as they get to the very edge, and microscopically you look at it, and you see that just little tiny fuzz. It's you can't even see it with your eyeballs. It's so fine. On the outermost fibrils is the tiny little microdots of information, and only when you step back about 6 paces from the shroud can you actually see the outline of a body. And you're like, wow. And so in a photographic negative, when you start looking at that and manipulating the image, all kinds of information comes out. You can see all the scourge marks. You can see the crown of thorns. This man was crucified. You can see the nail holes right through the wrist where it would have had to have been for it not to pull out. People, when it says hand, they nailed his hands. Well, in Hebrew, the hand is like basically the forearm all the way through the wrist to the hand. That's what they referred to as hand in that language in that time. So this is still very much part of the hand. But if you look at all the bones there, you could drive a nail through that spot and the body would hang there. Whereas if you put it in the middle of what we would call a hand in modern English, it'd tear right through because there's nothing to stop that. You know, a 160, 180 pound man, it would just tear right out. So this makes more sense. The Romans were good at crucifying people. They did a lot of it. And they always broke their legs to make sure the guys were, in fact, dead before they bothered to pull them down. Just a practical, mechanical necessity for killing all those people the way that they did. This guy's legs were not broken. The shroud demonstrates that. So crown of thorns, what was that about? It's mocking him as a king. Pierced to the side. There's the wound there, and they can study the size of the wound and measure it to the Roman spears and go, yep, same, and all of that, right? The body chemistry and the bilirubin and all that's in the shroud, it all testifies to exactly what took place. So another argument, people say, well, a lot of people were crucified. Well, not like that. Not with their legs unbroken, with a crown of thorns pierced through the side instead. And with all the scourging and lashings and the blotchy beard where they'd been plucking it and all of the other things, right? So just fascinating to study it. So with the image, Jack's looking at the shroud and trying to figure out, okay, nothing was transferred. So some energy irradiated this image onto that outermost fibrils. And so if you look at the shroud as this piece of paper, this is not the exact shape, but it was basically like this. So if he was laid down on this, if this was laid down flat, this is the shroud, laid down here with his feet toward one end, his head toward the middle, and then the other end of the shroud laid over the top of him, that's how it was done. And Jack said, we can measure that there's no smears of the blood stains. Once they placed the body on the shroud, it was not moved. And then once the shroud was laid over the body, it was not moved. And then within 3 days, before the body deteriorated, the body was gone and the shroud was never taken off the body. The shroud was never moved, peeled back. It stayed where it laid, yet the body was gone inside of 3 days. No deterioration of that body. So what happened? So he's starting to calculate. He's running calculations with all the different physics that he understands, the quantum mechanics, all the different particles, what happens. And he started running some stuff on the Higgs boson particle, which they call the God particle. And he says, Craig, one out of every 1,000 Higgs boson particles kind of misbehaves as far as quantum physics and what we understand particles normally does something very, very weird. So 1 out of every 1,000 Higgs boson particles tends toward order rather than disorder, which defies the second law of thermodynamics, which everything tends toward disorder. Like take your car, park it out in the desert, and in a million years, it's going to be dust because it's going to break down over time. Everything winds down and breaks back down and dismantles and disorders itself over time. But 1 out of every 1,000 Higgs boson particles orders itself. So it doesn't lose energy, it gains and gives off energy. So that's why he says it misbehaves, because they don't understand why this happens, but they can measure that it does. And he said there's another thing that confounds us in the lab is that one Higgs boson particle can be in more than one place simultaneously, which means if there can be two, there can be an infinite number of these things simultaneously. So when one turns, they're quantumly entangled. So what happens to one happens to the other, no matter how far away it is. Across the universe, it's the same as. Which, I mean, we have a hard time comprehending this. And since space and time are inseparable, the space-time continuum, he said, if they can be in more than one place simultaneously, they can be in more than one time simultaneously. So just file that away on a shelf for a minute. So he's looking, Higgs boson particles, 1 out of every 1,000 tends toward order rather than disorder, and they tend to recruit other particles around them to do the same. So he's like, okay, hang on a minute. If that happens, and if that began happening at the moment of death, how long would it take for one particle to recruit 2, and then 2 to recruit 4, and so on? And he said it's an exponential mathematical equation of how this works. He said it looked at the size, the weight, the body mass and all that, and just run all the math on it. And it was right about the same amount of time that Jesus would have been in that tomb, from Friday afternoon to Sunday morning. So he's like, okay, I'm getting, my hair's standing up on the back of my neck. Like I think I'm on to something here, because he's praying about it and he's studying the science. And then he said, something occurred to me, Craig, that when all the particles in the body, and he said if you watch that dead body lying in the tomb, you wouldn't notice anything about it for the first couple of days. But then in the last few minutes, you would have seen that body start to, you would have felt the ground rumbling, and you would have heard a very low-pitched rumble, and it would have been like an earthquake. There would have been a low-pitched, heavy vibrational shaking, and there would have been a high-pitched whirring, and it would have gotten louder until the moment where the last few million or few billion particles ordered themselves as this chain reaction accelerated until the entire body was what they refer to as super ordered, where all of the particles are now ordered perfectly. In other words, instead of spinning or vibrating in a certain way where there's electromagnetic field around it and we perceive it as physical matter, it's aligning itself perfectly to where it wouldn't have any resistance necessarily to other physical matter, because it's aligned perfectly and there's no spinning or vibration that would cause it to have any resistance, because between all the particles in the universe is inherently empty space. So it's the electromagnetic field around it that's my understanding of why a particle seems to have physical mass, why we perceive it as physical matter of different types. So he said at that moment of superorder, that body, if that shroud was laying on that body, that shroud would have fallen through it. At that moment of superorder, that flash of energy that they calculate would have had trillions of watts, and it would have killed anybody close by, certainly in that tomb. And maybe that's what knocked out the guards outside. I don't know. It'd be interesting. I guess one day we can ask Jesus, hey, was that thing with that when you resurrected, was that what knocked the guards out that had them asleep, or did they just not have good discipline and fall asleep on watch? But anyway, at that moment, the shroud would have fallen through him. And he said that would have explained why the body was not there and it was gone within 3 days, but yet the shroud had never been moved. So those blood stains were as they were when they laid the body and laid the shroud on, and it stayed that way. So fascinating stuff. And he said, Craig, it's all just theory until we test the backside. Because as it's true that on the front side, that the body that was in contact with the body, that had the image on it from that energy flash, then so should it on the backside where it fell through his body at the moment of super order where he was glorified. His body would have still been right there, maybe coming up and out of that position where it was. So he said, if my calculations are correct, Craig, and if my science theory is true, my hypothesis is factual, there should be his image on the outside of those outermost fibrils on the outside too. He said, but here's the thing. On this backside, there's a protective backing that the nuns sewed onto the shroud after that fire in the 1500s that made those stains, those scars that you see down both sides. Because it damaged the shroud and the nuns sewed a protective backing on to protect it. But he said, nobody knows to look, Craig, but he goes, I know that there should be, again, if my theory is accurate, an image here. Nobody else even knows to think about that. And he said they didn't remove the protective backing in their previous investigation. They didn't know to do that. They didn't even know to look there. And he said we were able to finally petition enough to get them to pull back some of that protective backing. And I said, Jack, please tell me the image is there. And he said, brother, it's there. It's there. It's on the inside. And it's on that outside. Again, only in the outermost fibrils, not on the inside of the heavy weave. So it's not like it's permeated all the way through. It's like it flashed here and then it's on the outside too, as that fell through that light, that glorified light body, if you want to call it that. And so imagine that, folks, a body that's glorified to that degree and super ordered. All of its particles are super ordered. That body can be here, or it can be there, or it could be multiple places, and it could be here now, it could be later, it could be anytime, any place. That's hard for we humans to comprehend with our consciousness, the way that we compute time and things, but we know that God is omniscient and he can do whatever he wants. All of it is his. He is almighty. He has created everything, and the physics are what they are because he spoke it to be that way. He commands this world and this universe to function the way that it does. Light is his. All of it is in all the energy. Everything is his. So everything except for him, everyone are created beings, and he's the creator. So I think that's fantastic. It's beautiful. They also said that the shroud is in a protective case, and you can see the protective case. It's got bulletproof glass on it. And Jack and Matthew Marsden were explaining to me they went to go purge out all the oxygen and charge it with nitrogen to make it an inert gas so that this thing couldn't deteriorate or break down. But as they were examining what's going on a microscopic level with the fibers, they were seeing whatever mold or mildew or fungus or microorganisms that would normally eat at a fiber and break it down. There's a microorganism that lives in the fibers of the shroud that is beneficial to preserving it. And that microorganism kills anything that's going against the shroud, that's eating its fibers or breaking it down. So, folks, you can make of that what you will. I know what I believe that's about. It seems pretty clear to me. But you decide. I mean, nobody's proven it to me, but that's what they're saying that the scientists found. And the blood is AB negative. It's a rare blood type. And the chromosomes, there's only 24 chromosomes in the blood. And the So if you have normal blood sample, there's 46 chromosomes, 23 from the mother, 23 from the father. This one's only got 24, 23 from the mother and 1 from the father, which is not human DNA. So Jack said, I know I can calculate it from the time of death. If this body's particles began doing this, then it would resurrect at the time that it did. He goes, I can calculate all that and understand what took place. He goes, but I don't understand why. What would have been the initial detonation point? What would have initiated that sequence? And I said, well, Jack, given the fact that that DNA was not human DNA of the Father, and God is who he is, and he knew he came to sacrifice himself and raise again in victory. Does it make sense to say that his DNA, isn't it true, Jack, that our hair and our eyelashes and our eye color and all our height and all that is all encoded in our DNA? Every cell of our body has our complete DNA in it that can completely replicate us. And he said, absolutely. All that information is in every cell of our body. I said, okay, then doesn't it make sense that his DNA would be programmed to do this, that upon death, when that physical body expired, that first Higgs boson particle would detonate that chain reaction and start recruiting other particles to where within that time by Sunday morning, that whole body was super ordered and glorified and came back to life just like he always knew he would. He could do it however he wants, but it's fascinating to comprehend a little bit of the quantum physics and the science of how God did it for me. I think it's just beautiful. And Jack said, well, Craig, I think that makes sense. It's a plausible hypothesis. So that's pretty cool. And I think another thing is because it would have taken, some time for that fiber. If you drop, how thick is a man? Not quite a foot thick, but linen. If you dropped it, how long does it take to fall? Takes some period of time. If you put it on a high-speed camera, you can watch it fall, right? Well, they don't know why they can measure the Shroud's image, a 2D image, and pull up a 3D image or statue. They could, out of that 2D image. They can't do that now with the technology they have. How was this 2D image encoded with 3D information 2,000 years ago? Nobody had the technology. At least we don't know that anybody did then. So I'm thinking if you do a CAT scan and it goes through, like if it went from your front to your back, it would go and your eyebrows and your nose would be first. And as every layer goes through, that scan would look different, right? Well, as that shroud fell through, if it was laying on Jesus' body and if it fell through him at that instant of super order, there would have been a timing of it. And there's a first and a next and a next and a next layer of that. And that 3D information would be time coded. So if you hit it with the right instrumentation, maybe that's why the scientists are able to pull that 3D image up out of that. And he said, Craig, I think that's fascinating. So I feel like I had a couple things to maybe add to the thought process of what may have happened there. But I wanted to share that with you because Jack Sacco, fantastic mind. I think God blessed that man with that knowledge and that understanding of what took place. And, I hope people just recognize the blessing that the Shroud of Turin is and not be at each other's throats over it. Again, nobody's going to worship the Shroud if they love Jesus Christ. He says, don't have any graven images before me. In other words, don't engrave a statue of a false god, small g, and worship that instead of me. Anybody that loves Jesus already, they're not going to worship any relic or artifact, but we are going to appreciate and go, wow, if that's proven authentic, that's a cool blessing. Just like you can walk to some of the places where Jesus walked. It's not that you're making an idol of that or you're going to worship that place or that room or whatever. It's just a note of, wow, that's a bit of confirmation history. What a beautiful blessing to add to what I already know about my Messiah, my King, my Lord and my Savior, my Creator, my Jesus. So I would like to see people approach it in more love and exercise a little bit more scientific study rather than just try to bomb each other and get so vicious and hateful about shutting everybody up and going, it's fake. And I'm like, wow, just settle down, everybody. It's going to be okay. If you don't believe it, fine, you don't have to, but you don't have to attack people that talk about a lot more scientific evidence than you know. So anyway, have your discussions. Please do it peacefully. Please do it in love. And if you're genuinely curious, there's so much information on it out there. But I wish everybody a happy Easter. The Shroud and Jesus Christ is not just for Easter, so year round. I hope this blesses you, and I wish you all the best. See ya.